Distinguished guests, please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of Siebert, Williams, Shank & Company, LLC, and Chair of the 2024 Mackinac Policy Conference, Suzanne Shank.
Good morning, good morning. So I'd like to open with a couple quick thank yous because yesterday time would not allow. First, I want to thank Matt Elliott and his wife Ann for their support over the last year. Matt always takes my calls, always has great advice. Thank you so much, Matt. I know he's behind stage. I have to give a big shout out to the Chamber team, Sandy and the team. They do exceptional logistics work. There's so much more that I found out in the process of planning this conference I had no idea about, things that none of us ever see. And so I want to thank them for their hard work, too many of them to name. And then lastly, but most important, I want to thank my husband, Sean Wordlow, for his steadfast support over the last year and always. So I hope you all enjoyed yesterday's speakers. I know I sure did, and I hope you all leaned into the theme, Bridging the Future Together. I hope you recall that I asked you to put function over dysfunction and people over politics. And I did that because I believe that we in this room have to be the catalyst for change because we're uniquely positioned to do so. In Michigan, like the rest of the United States, we talk a lot about the external challenges we face. And while those challenges are formidable, internal divisions can pose a greater threat. We cannot let what divides us define us. That's why the theme of Bridging the Future Together is so important, and I hope you're taking me up on my challenge. Have you all met someone yet you do not know? Okay, great, and if not, today's the day. Because we really do need to reach across our divides, across the aisle, outside our comfort zones, embrace others we might not otherwise engage. Now, it's been long past time we put Michigan's beautiful diversity on full display and show the world what we can accomplish when we are all working toward the same shared goal of a more prosperous state. And that's the same strategy our entire country needs to adopt to move forward in these divisive and challenging times. Now, diversity is well displayed on our stage, and we're extremely proud of our lineup of speakers this year. I'm also honored to be the first Black woman chair of this Mackinac Policy Conference. Thank you. Representation matters on this stage as it does in the C-suite, halls of political power, and every room where important decisions are being made. For women and people of color, this is important because if we can see it, we can be it. As verified data demonstrates, the more diversity we have at the table, the more innovative, productive, and prosperous Michigan can be. Now, I'm very fortunate to serve on the Detroit Regional Chamber's Racial Justice and Economic Equity Board Committee. Working with several of you in this room, we are ensuring that as an organization, the Chamber is doing its part to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. After all, with Detroit being 78% Black, how can we make progress without closing the racial equity gap? We as leaders should hold our organizations accountable to be more inclusive. We can also use our lanes of influence to create a more equitable society. Now, on your seats, you'll find the Chamber's Racial Justice and Economic Equity Progress Report that we began publishing after the murder of George Floyd to ensure that we are putting action behind our words. I'd like to share a few key takeaways. Comprised of many of my fellow Chamber board members and chaired by Dennis Archer Jr., the Chamber's Racial Justice Committee guides our work to drive long-term societal and economic change. Our 3 work streams include internal focus, external programming, and leveraging the Chamber's regional and convening power. As part of that process, the Chamber appointed Marnita Harris as its first Vice President of Racial Justice and Economic Equity. We're also working to increase diversity at all levels of the chamber. Racial diversity among chamber staff has increased from 29% to 42% as we continue to work to make further improvements. We've also made gains on our board of directors. Since 2017, the chamber has improved our board member diversity by 122%. Since 2016, Black board member diversity has increased 138%. Through these efforts, the chamber is walking the walk when it comes to racial justice and economic equity. We have not throttled back or curtailed our efforts to lead and remain dedicated to creating the equitable and just society we all desire. Now, one other effort I'd like to highlight is the Detroit Resident Voices Survey that was revealed at last year's Mackinac Policy Conference. Through its national partnership with Gallup, the Chamber is part of the organization's 100-year commitment and Center on Black Voices initiative. With Gallup, the Chamber executed the first Detroit Resident Voices Survey. What made this survey unique was that the residents determined what thriving means to them as opposed to a set of tracking numbers. The findings were quite striking. What we learned is that the most thriving neighborhood in Detroit is Indian Village. Now, that's not surprising at all. But the second highest neighborhood is Durfee. Durfee has a very different demographic than Indian Village. But what separates Durfee is its work with a dedicated nonprofit. The Durfee Innovation Society makes residents feel included, supported, and safe. As a result, those residents view their lives as thriving. Bringing resident voices to the table is important to advancing racial equity, and this survey allows us to amplify their voices and bring them into the decision-making process. Based on the success of the first survey, the Chamber is busy raising funds to support a second. It will provide year-over-year data to drive collective action that delivers meaningful change in Detroit and across the region. It's meant to inform the work many of you in this room are doing to create a more equitable and prosperous Detroit region. The second survey is going to allow more customization and neighborhood-level analysis. So if there's an issue important to you, be it access to quality health care or reliable transit or the number of parks in a community, the next survey can be tailored to prioritize your specific topic or geography. It gives businesses a path to collaborate with civic and philanthropic partners working in the equity space to make a substantive, long-term impact. Supporting this survey is a great way to drive positive, meaningful change and can position Detroit as a national leader in closing racial equity gaps. It's also one way we can bridge the future together. Now, before I close, I'd like to carry on what's become a tradition on Thursday at Mackinac and name next year's conference chair. He's been a great ambassador for the Chamber and has taken a hands-on approach in helping our region and state shape its talent future. He leads the CEO Talent Council, which provides strategic direction to the Chamber's education and talent portfolio. And he's been a key voice as we work to increase educational attainment and maintain the talent pipeline businesses need to compete. I am proud to announce Kelly's President and CEO, Peter Quigley, as the chair of the 2025 Mackinac Policy Conference. And I also want to ask his bride, Nancy, to stand because you're a big part of this, whether you like it or not. Thank you so much.
Please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber,
Good morning, everyone.
Sandy Baruah.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for joining us again. I want to add my congratulations Peter, we're so looking forward to both of your leadership and engagement. So thanks for signing on. And contrary to all the rumors, Peter was actually in the room when we decided. It's not like he left and voted him in when no one was looking. I want to thank Suzanne and Sean for their leadership, Matt and Ann for their leadership. It has been just a terrific run, especially for me personally, to work with such incredible leaders and to see people of those calibers committing to the work of the Detroit Regional Chamber. Now, yesterday, when I kicked off the conference, I talked about the juxtaposition between the theme of this year's conference, Bridging the Future Together, and how this era of misinformation that we live in, that was addressed so eloquently by Speaker Ryan and Chuck Todd yesterday, really requires proactive engagement by the business community and business leaders that, frankly, is a new role for all of us. Now, while the Chamber's statewide polling that I've been talking about all week has uncovered several areas of misinformation and disconnects within the public, including basic views about how the economy is actually doing, I've been focusing on 3 areas this week. Yesterday, I highlighted the troubling views that Michigan voters hold about democracy. Those are certainly eye-popping numbers. What today I want to do is address 2 issues of particular importance to the state of Michigan: post-secondary education and the auto industry's move to electrification. Let's start with EVs. Michigan is the auto state, full stop. Now, some might find that an unfashionable statement. I still think it is one of our greatest strengths. The auto industry is the most complex and most valuable supply chain on the planet. Any nation that has 2 coconuts to rub together is vying for some piece of that automotive supply chain, and we have the competitive advantage here in Michigan. And despite what media headlines or some politicians like to claim, the global automotive industry is transitioning to electrification. And yes, in this past year in the United States, EV sales growth is slowing. The growth is slowing. It doesn't mean it's not growing. Now let's get into our time machines and go back to the 1970s and the 1980s. At that time, Michigan downplayed the competitive threat posed by foreign competition. We downplayed the competitive threats on quality and particularly fuel efficiency. We failed to lead, we failed to innovate, and I think you can make an argument that we're still paying the price for that misstep all those years ago. So today, the dynamics are definitely different. Our companies are not only taking the transition to electrification and, frankly, for autonomy seriously, they're actually in a position to lead globally in these areas. But too many of our fellow Michiganders view EVs as a political issue, not an economic one. This is dangerous because it's going to be really hard for our companies to lead if the people aren't following. In our statewide polling, only 18% of Michiganders believe our local companies are making EVs because of consumer demand. 71% believe it's just because of pressure from environmentalists and government. And there's no doubt that those elements are a factor in this, particularly government, but generally companies don't invest billions upon dollars if they don't think there is a return in their future. So let's take a look at the EV market just today. Let's be the first to recognize that EVs aren't for everyone, certainly today. If you're John Dutton, you're not going to be electrifying your Ram pickup truck on the Yellowstone Ranch anytime soon. I don't think the cows want the chargers in their pastures. if you tow a John Dutton horse trailer on a regular basis, if you do actually take that trip to grandma's over the hill and through the dale or whatever it is on a regular basis that no one actually ever does, a Chevy Bolt is not for you, even though we had one and we loved it. But think of the EV market today, and I'm specifically using today. People always like to talk about, especially my friends in industry, about how things are going to change and how quickly the technology is going to change, and it will, right? Think about just how quickly mobile communications changed and what our cell phones look like today versus what they did just a decade ago. But just today, with today's range issues around winter weather use, using an EV in the winter. Think about the charging infrastructure issues that are very, very real. Think about the cost premium for EVs. So even with today's market, what do we have? Think of middle class and above families who have their own home with a garage. How easy is it for this demographic to add one EV to their multiple car garage? You have one ICE vehicle for those trips to grandma, or if you are actually towing your horse trailer, and one car that is an EV to supplement the ICE vehicle. This is a lush market just today, but it's hard for it to be a lush market if it's become a political issue and not an economic issue. And let's not forget the lesson that we hopefully learned from the 1970s and 1980s about ignoring a competitive threat. The Chinese are coming. They're already making significant inroads in other parts of the world, particularly Europe and Latin America. And they're already setting up shop in Mexico to build their EVs there. And it's important to remember that what the Chinese made a decade ago or even 5 years ago is a far cry from what they're making today. Today, their cars are incredibly technologically advanced, and they're beautiful. They have the best designers in the world working for Chinese companies. They are an incredibly serious threat to our industry. So let's shift now to the value of a post-secondary education, because perhaps no issue is more important when it comes to Michigan's future economic and social trajectory. Access to highly educated talent is the #1 issue on employers' minds, right? Full stop. Yet there's a disconnect in the mind of Michigan voters. Only 19% feel that a college degree is what it takes to support a family in Michigan going forward. But if you look at this chart, the data shows otherwise. Senior executives based here in Michigan, like Mary Baruah of General Motors or Raj Nair of Multimatic, have said it very plainly. Their companies will go where the talent resides. Their hearts may be in Michigan, but their business demands may take them elsewhere if we cannot supply the necessary skilled talent. And a key problem is that voters don't know how much a college education actually costs, either a 2-year or a 4-year. And because they don't know the costs, they are unclear of the value. Only 22% of voters say a 4-year degree is worth the money. But let's take Wayne State University, for example. Our statewide polling shows that over 60% of respondents think that the average debt load for a Wayne State student is over 50 grand. In reality, half of all of Wayne State students graduate with 0 debt. And those who do graduate with debt carry less than $25,000 of debt. So I'm really glad we're going to be addressing this issue head-on in a panel later today. We're going to be in conversation with some of our leading university presidents, including our new president at Michigan State University, Kevin Gutstowitz, Santa Ono from the University of Michigan, Ora Peskovich from Oakland University, and Bill Pink from Ferris State, all moderated by Zoe Clark. This is an incredibly important issue, not just access, but affordability around 4-year and 2-year education in Michigan. Also today, this afternoon, I'm going to have the great honor of paying tribute to 3 incredible friends. At 1:45, it is going to be my honor to be joined by my friend Gary Torgo to honor the incomparable Sandy Pierce. As we all know, Sandy has made the decision to leave banking, but she's not retiring. But Sandy Pierce is incredibly important to this conference, our chamber, and to me personally. Sandy was chair of the chamber when I was hired. She's the former chair of this conference. She's been a dear friend, and she has led many organizations, including the great Detroit Economic Club, and I see Steve Gregorian here today. But we're going to honor her today for her work for the Mackinac Policy Conference. At 2:30 today, we're going to honor retiring U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow for her lifetime in public service for the people of Michigan. I had the pleasure and honor of knowing Senator Stabenow when we were in Washington together. And what I said in the little piece that I wrote is that, Senator Stabenow and I didn't always agree, but we always had great respect for each other. And I have enjoyed working with her and her team for many, many years, and she has been a steadfast supporter of this conference and the work of the Detroit Regional Chamber. And finally, to end our day, Dan Lepp, who obviously is retiring from his longtime role as the CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. There has been no individual that has been a greater supporter of the Detroit Regional Chamber and this conference than Dan Lepp. And I'm going to be very pleased to be joined by the governor of our state, Gretchen Whitmer, to honor Dan Lepp for his incredible service and passion for this organization. And a pitch before we wrap up today. At 4 o'clock today in the Brighton Pavilion, we're going to be featuring the quadrant leaders for Michigan. Please join us. That's a separate ticket. But if it's anything like last year, it's a raucous event. It'll be worth every penny. So please be sure to stop by there. And finally, it's back. On the Island Off the Record. It also has a nickname that I'm not allowed to use. Tonight, 6:30, down in the Tea Garden, please join me and our civility champions, Nolan Finley and Stephen Henderson, along with WDIV's Devin Skillion, who will perform, and we've arranged a sing-along this year, Take Me Home, Country Roads. So please join us in the Bourbon Tent, at the On the Island Off the Record, sponsored by our friends at Dow. Thanks again for joining us. Enjoy the day.